delighted to be filming here for Policing TV this morning. Let's go inside and find out more. Welcome to Policing TV, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Andrew Snowden MP on the rooftop of Portcullis House, which itself is part of the parliamentary estate. Andrew, thank you so much for joining Policing TV and welcoming us to Portcullis House.
Absolute pleasure.
Tell us, orientate us a little bit.
So we stood on a roof terrace here. Behind me, just poking its head above, you can see Big Ben, and the Palace of Westminster is over there. The parliamentary estate, the MP's offices, where there's 6,000 people who work here, and a lot of people don't realise the amount of buildings that form the parliamentary estate that is beyond just the Palace of Westminster. And then if you're a tourist, as you can see as the camera rotates around, we've got Westminster Abbey here in the background. And as we move around, we've got the Cabinet Office, and then we talk about the corridors of power, but right here we're looking down the road of power. All of the big government department, Home Office is actually in that direction, but all of the big government departments, the Ministry of Defence, number 10 Downing Street, you can see the Cenotaph, and then Nelson's Column just in the distance. So this very much is the heart of government in the UK.
So, Andrew, we're going to start this Policing TV conversation with introducing you to viewers UK and internationally. Those within the UK probably already aware of your time as the Police and Crime Commissioner for Lancashire, but let's start a little bit back before that. So tell us a little bit about what first interested you in policing, what interested you in politics, and what led to you standing for election as the Lancashire Police and Crime Commissioner?
Well, I'll try and make this as concise as I can. And being a politician, we have a habit of rambling on and liking the sound of our own voice. So basically, I was brought up in Bolton. I went to the University of Salford, where I studied military history. So I think my interest in uniformed services and the structure of them, the way they're organised, has been ever since my degree in university, which obviously covered security and terrorism and other things as well as the traditional military services. I've always been interested in politics. I've always been a bit of a political geek, a bit of an anorak. But that's hopefully what's helped get me here. So I had a career in the private sector, then I went back actually to the University of Salford, where I held a number of roles, working my way up to Associate Director at the university. I got elected as a county councillor in Lancashire whilst I was working at the university, so started to build up a profile in politics, and then the vacancy came up for Police and Crime Commissioner, and I'd been on the parliamentary candidates list for quite some time, and a little probably an unknown fact is you have to be these days on the approved parliamentary candidates list for the Conservative Party to apply to be a Police and Crime Commissioner. I had lots of conversations with my wife about where we were at that moment in time, what my interests were, and I really felt there was a job of work to be done in rebuilding confidence and trust in policing, about being the public's voice in policing, but also about championing the front line and making sure that officers were supported in doing what they wanted to do in terms of keeping the public safe. So that is a very whistle-stop tour of how I ended up as Police and Crime Commissioner for Lancashire.
So let's just unwrap a little bit of the time that you spent as Police and Crime Commissioner, some I think 3 years as the Lancashire Police and Crime Commissioner. What were your recollections of that, and what did you learn from that time?
It was an incredibly exciting and proud time of my life. I think there's one thing that if you do take the role really seriously, if you throw yourself into it, you cannot be anything other than inspired by the men and women that make up the front line of British policing. I had a great Chief Constable in Chris Rowley that I worked with for the majority of the time, and we had real shared values, which actually it's very complex, but it's actually very simple at the same time. And the things that the police do to manage risk and threat, and in that ever-changing and ever-developing world, and making sure that resources keep up with that was a huge challenge. But equally, what the public see, actually, we're looking down the street here, is the police on the streets. It's neighbourhood policing, and actually, in the UK, we police by consent. We police by the consent of the public. Very few police officers carry guns. It's not a policing by force, it's policing by consent. And therefore, to maintain consent, you have to have public confidence. And therefore, a big drive was around neighbourhood policing, rural policing, and about making sure that whether you lived in a city or a village, if you were a victim of a crime, there was adequate policing resource in neighbourhood to be able to do that. We also had some hugely big international stories. So we have the tragic Nicola Bulley missing from home investigation, which saw Lancashire as a county force in the north of England go to probably being one of the best known police forces in the country, quite often for the wrong reasons, for quite a period of time. And that was really, really difficult and challenging as well, being in the public eye of policing at that moment in time, trying to explain what was going on when a massive media vacuum had been filled around speculation, where TikTok and YouTube videos with amateur detectives took over the narrative. And that was a huge learning experience around the power of communication. And as the independent review concluded, it was an exceptionally well-run police investigation that the narrative was lost on. I think remembering in policing the importance of communicating what the police are doing effectively to the public is something that I really learned in that time.
Now, politics is fickle, and earlier on this year you had an election defeat and
Yes.
an election victory. Just talk us through that.
Yeah, it's a very bittersweet moment to become a Member of Parliament for the Conservative Party, so one of just 26 new Conservative MPs. It is the first time, I believe, in history that over 50% of the House is new members. So it's been a huge period of change. I don't want to unpick the results of the general election. We're currently having a leadership election to do just that. But obviously it was a disaster for the Conservative Party. Anyone who tries to spin it as anything else is our worst election defeat in history. And I think some of it was self-inflicted, and I think there's a lot to learn from those 14 years in policing as well. And I think there's a lot that the party there needs to understand what happened, why, and how we address fundamentals going forward rather than just window dressing.
So you are, I think, the only Conservative MP in Lancashire.
Yes.
You are one of only 3 Conservative MPs in the northwest of England. So you have quite a responsibility, perhaps, beyond your electorate in Fylde, which is close to Blackpool, for those unfamiliar with precise locations.
Trying to locate where Fylde is. The beautiful Lytham St Anne's and then rural Fylde all around
It's a beautiful area, I can testify to that. If you get a chance to visit Fylde, highly, highly recommended. Just a little on now that you are here in Parliament, finding your feet, if I may say that, early days, what are your ambitions for your parliamentary career over and above representing the electorate in Fylde?
I think most parliamentarians are 2 things. One, they are constituency MPs, so they have a responsibility to be the voice of their constituents. And as a Conservative, that also involves being a voice for Conservative voters across Lancashire as well, and people who ally with that Conservative outlook on life. But we're also parliamentarians. And we are here to, well, in the case of the Conservative Party now, to scrutinise and hold the government to account, but also to work collaboratively on all-party parliamentary groups, on select committees and through other means to effectively make good policy. And whilst the Chamber and the theatrics of Prime Minister's questions and other things like that show the confrontation in politics, a lot of what you see on the estate beyond that is collaborative working to try and make good policy. So I might not agree with a lot of things that Labour may choose to do on home affairs, on policing. However, I have a duty as a parliamentarian to work with them to make it the best it can be. So we're going to complete 2 further recordings in a moment or two. That introduces you to our international viewers and probably reminds those UK viewers of your background, including your policing background. For the time being, though, Andrew Snowden MP, thank you very much indeed. Very much pleasure. Great to see you again.